Okay, today I wanted to talk about a concept which will help us determine the most likely scenario for what we're seeing in the 2020 chaos, and that is Occam's razor. Let's talk about it. Okay, so Occam's razor is basically a philosophical tool. It's also known as the law of parsimony. And you're like, what does that mean? It's a philosophical tool which will help us shave off or eliminate unlikely explanations for a phenomenon or an event. So when you have competing explanations for the same phenomena, the rule says that the simplest is likely the correct one. And this has been a very good tool in the past for trying to come to the best conclusion. And it's really a tool that's been used over the years among skeptics, where we can have an open mind about things and come to a conclusion based on the simplicity of likelihood. So let's look at how this applies to the 2020 chaos, shall we? Yeah, so when we think about what's floating around, which the mainstream calls misinformation, which in this case is misinformation on this issue, and that being the idea that, well, there's several ideas. Number one, among Christians, that it's the mark of the beast. I debunked that in a previous video, and you can look at it. I didn't go into all of the scripture on it, but I basically laid out the historical precedent against that view and against premillennial dispensationalism. But that's the number one theory that are among many, many evangelical Christians. Not all of them, but a good chunk of them believe that this vax is the mark of the beast. And the second theory is that the usual suspects, the elites, are attempting to poison the world and kill us off in large numbers. And that's a theory based on some previous statements about depopulation by Bill Gates. It's also peppered through documents that are publicly available, and they would hold up as he's responsible for funding this whole effort for that to happen. That's the second one. The third one is the entire that all of vaccines are bad, and this is primarily pushed by anti-vaxxers who, in the past, have drawn a causation link, and we talked about the causation fallacy in my last video, between vaccines and autism, for example. So those are the three main arguments that are floating around, and that there's really a fourth one too, and that this is medical tyranny, which is sort of a kissing cousin of the third one, really. So basically, when we look at all of these theories, we have to compare them under Occam's razor, under that process, the philosophical process, and look at the likelihoods. And we've already gotten rid of the number one, because it's not the mark of the beast. And there's some that also say that it could be a precursor. But as I explained, Revelation is not a book that is a literal book. It's a vision. It's not a literal explanation of events sequentially in the future. Many of these events in Revelation have been historically already fulfilled. And we talked about that, AD 70 and the fall of Jerusalem and Nero, a type of Antichrist. But we talked about that a little bit in a previous video, but I just wanted to mention that as a subset of number one. Now, likelihoods on the remainder of them really come down to how could you have pharmaceutical companies all of the scientists and the doctors in those pharmaceutical companies, as well as the governments, how could they collude and there not be one true whistleblower? And how could that have even gotten off the ground? How could they have been released? And the likelihood of that is infinitesimal, given that, unless you want to say that every single person that works in pharmaceuticals are Freemasons. And I don't think anybody has claimed that. That would have to be the case in order to keep that secret. Because Freemasons basically are a secret society, and they do keep secrets. So by extension, you would have to have Freemasons, every one of them, be Freemasons that are involved in the making of this vaccine for it to be really hush-hush. And I don't think anybody's asserting that, and that's impossible. So the likelihood of that is staggeringly low. And the rational mind must reject that. Now, that doesn't mean there's not a conspiracy. It just means that that's not the conspiracy. You see? So we eliminate that. Based on Occam's razor, that's the least likely. Now, the autism link, as I already inferred, is a causation fallacy, which is a logical fallacy in that assigning a causation of vaccines to autism is engaging in the causation fallacy. It's looking at a correlation and attributing it to a causation. That's impossible. To embrace that would be to really not have facts. Now, there may be a link. It's possible, of course, that vaccines have caused harm to a number of people, because we do have an increase in all kinds of childhood maladies. However, until we get some evidence, we can't fall on that sword. You see, we can't make assertions based on no evidence. And we can't make a decision to not get a vaccine based on that, you see. So that would be engaging in a fallacy in order to promote refusing a vax. So what do we have left? Well, we have Bill Gates and those folks and the depopulation agenda. Again, and I'm not saying that Bill Gates didn't say that, well, the earth could use less people, and many have said that. And on the Georgia Guidestones, it does say that. However, you have to be able to create a link between those documents and those Guidestones and provide a link of causation from that and a direct link to somebody or a group of people that are actively doing this. You see, you can't just speculate and throw around things, because that doesn't work. You see, you have to have more evidence, just like in a trial, or even not just beyond a reasonable doubt. I'm not even going to have to make it go that high. Let's just say the preponderance of the evidence simply does not support those theories. My theory, however, does not require really very much effort or work on anybody's part, to be honest, because all they have to do is basically open the spigot on YouTube, Facebook, and maybe have a few plants, government plants. It's easy to do. There's plenty of shills out there to promote bad information on YouTube, and then other people will watch it and then promote it. You see, it's a snowball effect. That's a reasonable belief. Even if you take government out of it and people did it on their own, it's still misinformation because there's no proof for any of their assertions. You see, that's the bottom line of it. And, I know very smart people that are adhering to these kind of things, and I was one of them. And to be honest, if they just applied Occam's razor, for instance, to these theories, they would reject them out of hand because they're using an objective process rather than a subjective. Because what happens is when you're taking in these theories over and over and over and over again, you're strengthening your own belief. You're in an echo chamber. You're not allowing other information in. And that's very dangerous because now, after a while, you can't be reached. And the only person that's going to be able to reach you is God himself through the Holy Spirit, for the Christian, to basically make you snap out of that echo chamber and those false beliefs. See, that's how cults are formed, to be quite honest with you. Cults are formed in a sort of echo chamber. And I'm not saying they're cultists, but I'm saying it starts to become like that over time. The more, it's like a snowball effect. So misinformation is actually more dangerous even than the mainstream is letting on. And I believe that it is deliberate. It is a deliberate campaign to misinform certain segments of the population to set them up for a big fall, whether it be arrest, whether it be being pushed out of society, whether it be any negative consequence that results from refusing a vax that has clear scientific backing to it, and mRNA study going back 10 to 20 years. So the problem comes in with measuring these things objectively, outside of an echo chamber, and using cold logic. And this is where Occam's razor comes in very handy, because you can eliminate the less likely things, because something is clearly going on. These things just don't happen accidentally, these pandemics. So in my opinion, I think it's a psyop on conspiracy theorists and Christians that are gullible enough to believe misinformation and fake news with no backing whatsoever. And this is a major problem. Now, I'm not blaming, because I was doing it, I'm not blaming people who are victims of this. What I am simply saying is they need to get off YouTube for a week or two. They need to think about things, look at Occam's razor, look at probabilities, look at possibilities, and then come to your own conclusion. I'm not telling you what to believe. I'm telling you, come to your own conclusion based on the evidence, not based on rumor, which is basically YouTube and Facebook is one big rumor mill. And that is the worst place in the world to get information. Just think way back in the day when the game of telephone, for example, when there was a rumor started, somebody deliberately, and it's been tested, these things have been tested and found to happen. Somebody deliberately drops a false rumor, And we all know what happens. That kind of information travels like wildfire. And so you drop it, and then it gets transmitted all over the place fast, and it even mutates into something worse. So by the time somebody else gets it, that rumor has propagated into something absolutely crazy, as if the original rumor wasn't bad enough, So, and it is, because what's out there is absolutely at this point ridiculous. And I've had people tell me about Occam's razor early on in this pandemic, and I didn't understand what they meant. I understood what it was, but I didn't want to stop and think. I was in a bubble, an information bubble with the same people, with the same websites, with the same YouTube videos, with the same Facebook posts. And because YouTube and Facebook did some censorship, that only reconfirmed my previous belief, you see. But the censorship is only a ruse, because they're not really censoring, because if they censored to the best of their ability, none of this stuff would be out, you see. It would all have been shut down, but it's not. As a matter of fact, the larger channels are surviving and thriving. There's a reason for that, folks. It's not accidental. It's not, we're doing the best we can. No. No way do I believe YouTube and Facebook are doing the best they can on disinformation. I just watched a interview with Mark Zuckerberg and CNN this morning, and it was unbelievable how he stonewalled this thing. And this was all just basically a setup. I mean, this interview was not information gathering at all. He was basically stonewalling. He didn't give any details on what they're doing and how they will do any better. Basically, he just said, we're doing the best we can, and we have this other good information on there too, and that was all there was to it. So you're being suckered, you're being conned, you're being psyoped, and you don't even realize it on there. But it's the only explanation. It's the best explanation to what's going on here. And this is only going to get worse and worse. And the saddest part about this is that people are legitimately actually dying. They're not fakes. They're dying, unless you want to go dig them up and check the gravestone. They are dying, and they are dying of COVID. And I'm here to tell you that I'm in a hot spot, and it is happening. I have anecdotal and direct evidence of that. And no, they're not from the vax. That is another thing that I'm going to deal with. I think I have a video plan. Yes, I have a video plan for tomorrow on that subject. So stay tuned for that. All right. So that's as far as I need to go so far on this. I'm going to stop right here. But that's the example, Occam's razor. You got to apply this. People are calling me all kinds of names, and that's fine. I'm not a truther anymore. Whatever, dude, whatever. You're not thinking rationally. You're not rightly dividing the scriptures. You're in outer space. And the sooner you come back down to earth, the easier it's going to be for you, because this is not going away. You're being psyoped, and you're being psyoped very badly. Okay? So you need to wake up from your slumber and understand that there could be other explanations for what's going on. You need to stop with these unreasonable, and it's fear-mongering. You want to talk about the media, the mainstream media fear-mongering. No, the ones fear-mongering are you. You're the ones being psyoped. You're fear-mongering people, and they're rejecting this vax based on the fear-mongering and with no facts. So you guys need to stop it, okay? I'm just here to tell you, as a friend and as somebody who cares about you, if you're doing this, you need to consider the possibility, like I did, that I'm wrong, and regroup and get your head on straight and start thinking biblically and start thinking rationally. And that's really all I have to say about it at the time. But tomorrow I'm going to talk about the latest theory floating around out there about the vax causing the Delta variant surge. That's floating around out there now. So I'm going to deal with that tomorrow. So have a good one. Thanks for joining me. Ciao.